right? Like just somebody, and that's such an explicit, like, you're really doing a dick move then, right? Like that's like, oh my God, you're not just overstepping your authority. You're just like, what the hell are you doing?
I tagged my PR as release.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're never doing that again.
Yeah. But that's the only one that like you can revert pretty much anything else, but like, tags are pushed, they're out there, like that's life. But that's such a ridiculous, like that's kind of a mic drop, I'm out kind of thing. And so I think that, that again, not optimizing to make sure that nobody can, accidentally, also an employee get, like one of you guys can do that on your last day and then quit, so it's not like.
No, I'm more worried because people open PRs against the wrong thing all the time. And unless you're really looking for it, you're merging against the wrong branch. And then things are put in there and nobody notices that. We're going to release in a bug fix release this big feature that was not really intended there or tested, or because there's no test for the new feature.
Does that happen now?
It almost happened once, but since we're a small team, it's easy to catch. Now, if you have 10 people doing it, it's going to be much harder to catch.
I'm going to go ahead and just say what I wrote on the IRC channel, that either we're sticking with GitHub issues, we need to come up with community norms, we need to canonize how people get or lose commit access, and we need to accept a certain level of human error, or we need to move off GitHub issues.
And we've been looking at that, and actually, I don't know if you've seen the open letters to GitHub from GitHub back, and there's not only us, but many other open source contributors on GitHub had complained. The issues are unusable. Once we scale over 10 contributors, this is like impossible.
Yeah.
And GitLab comes up and says, hey, look, we have templates. We have all this you're asking for. And now GitHub's sent back a letter saying, look, we're working on this. We're going to give it to you. We're going to deliver. We're sorry. We'll be better.
Nice.
Until then, well, until then, I've been looking at other options of either going to an external issue tracker, being able to migrate everything that we already have, dealing with the PRs. I haven't seen anything easy unless we actually migrate completely off GitHub, which I also don't think we want to do. But again, it's not going to be an easy thing because the issue tracker severely sucks for anything that is not 10 people keeping track of their stuff.
Yeah.
We have 1,000 people sending PRs. It's part of the reason why there's such a backlog is that it's very, very hard to handle all that. And it's very hard to get the correct information everywhere. Just having issue templates alone where people can select from a dropdown would be an enormous help. And we can't do that.
Well, we can build a front end that we can push people through, actually. We can say, we can just auto close any new issue that doesn't conform to certain
that's
things,
what the old
and say go to make sure that we don't auto close your bug, go to this web page and fill out this form instead of submitting a GitHub issue. Yeah. And that's something we will do.
Yeah,
we will
make a bugs.ansible.com page or something like that. That's basically just front ending the REST API of the
that's basically what the old Ansible bot did, and that got very mixed reviews from people. People hated it. People tolerated it.
Yeah.
Not really.
Well, we turned it off. We should. I mean, instead of optimizing it, we just said, well, nope. So we can just keep working on that. I mean, that's from an issues perspective. At some point, that's going to be non-negotiable. We're just going to do that. We cannot triage issues that we don't even have enough data to understand. So, and some people might not like that, but
although that's our biggest time sink.
Yeah, right.
And that's the reason that a lot of times we can't get to the PRs as much as we want. And even the PRs, sometimes we get a PR that does this fix, but we don't understand what the problem was to start with. Right. People don't detail what is this fixing. They just give us a fix.
Right.
We have to figure out what is fixing, what does it break, what's the interactions. It takes time, and a lot of that time we could save off with getting more information up front.
The underlying question, and we're going to keep coming back to it, is whether outside people will ever get commit access trust or not. So, and that's an issue that we keep talking around.
I would say some outside people already have it. The
Yep.
question is, are we going to expand that, and how, and to how many?
All right. So
There's currently only one outside person that has commit access to core, to the main repo, and that's Civil, because he does so much.
right. And why does he do so much?
A lot of people in this group who do a lot of things.
Well,
Well,
let me follow up on that. Why does he do so
Not
much?
to a level of civil.
So he has a very vested interest in Ansible continuing to work.
Doesn't everyone who would want to commit to Ansible have that vested interest? And I would say that one of the reasons that Civil does so much is because Civil is empowered to do so much.
Well, he's empowered to do that by the Ansible project. He's also empowered to do that by his employer. So not only does he have a personal vested interest, his employer has a vested interest and is letting him spend his work time on it. It's not a hobby, it's part of his day job.
Who here does Ansible as a hobby and it's not related to their day job in some way?
But is also, I mean, there are people here, like all of the people here, it's not only their job, it's also their hobby, right? That's how it is. So, everything that we, everything that we say about Civil and why he commits and the amount of work he does, I would argue that we could say about Crab, right?
Yeah, I'm not trying to claim that he's unique in any way. I'm just explaining
There's some
how he got to the point that he was at.
So so Shrews, who works on the OpenStack stuff, he is 100% of his time paid by his employer to work on that, right? But he's paid to work on that. So most of the time there aren't issues in Ansible that need to be addressed to do that. So as much as he has a very large vested interest in this, wants everything to work and everything, but like the people who need to actually who for whatever reason need to hack in the actual core bits, like core bits work really well. Like it's, you start to get into some fairly esoteric things when you need to fix things at that level, So I think there is depending on what you're doing with your day job or your hobby or whatever, what those interests are, you wind up, I think that's the reason we have so many contributors to modules, and less people where it makes sense. They're just not doing enough, work in the core because the core works so damn well. It's maybe if you guys would write less good code in the core, we'd have more people who wanted
He corrects me.
So I don't know, it's a
Crab is one of the few people that is contributing a lot to core and a lot to the guts. I mean, he's revamped basically the SSH plugin and how the become detection works. He's been helping me and correcting me on dealing with the shell and dealing with the different interactions with different shells.
Right. So we're ready to give him commit.
I say we put it up to a vote.
Are we voting?
I'm ready to give him commit, but I think that we should have a hierarchy. Well, we should have, a definition of different things that we want people to be able to do.
Okay.
Like Crab, I would be happy to give him commit to do triage. I would be happy to give him commit to merge something if Brian has also reviewed it. So he's one of those people to core. I would say I want someone else, a second set of eyes to have looked at it. But once that second set of eyes has gone there and said, fix this one thing and you're fine.
Do we have
let
that
him
essentially for
do it.
everything in Ansible? Does everything we commit in Ansible have that second set of eyes?
It doesn't right now.
Mostly.
So on the project I work for, we have enforced second sets of eyes, and that's great and as a policy. But I actually really like that in Ansible, as much as there are policies, there's also common sense sometimes. You honestly do not need a second set of eyes for some trivial things. It's just when you start abusing this is trivial, like like having overarching policies is a thing that you can use as a hammer to go hit somebody on the fingers with.
Yeah.
But like you've got to be able to use judgment.
If I have to reject every module that doesn't have a version added,
Yeah.
If you look, there's probably 70 commits for me in the last month that are added and missing version added.
Yeah.
Well, it's because they initially tried to add it in 1.7.
Or don't have it at all. or don't have it at all.
because they have no idea when it's going to be accepted.
Yeah. Aside from that, there should always be a version added or other things. There's people passing stuff without description, but the description is clear, and I take care of small things like that.
Right.
Things like revamping shell, I've created a PR because I'm not going to merge that directly.
Right.
And I've had the rest of the core team and Crab look at it because it deals with basically it affects everything
That will break everything.
at that point.
Yeah.
So there's the two extremes. I'm updating documentation, or I'm updating the core communication and how Ansible is able to communicate, to access and log it into every machine. It's very different scopes.
Yeah.
Right.
So for the first one, I said, just let me commit, because if not, I'm going to go back and forth with the guy. Hey, add a version added. He comes 6 months later, he adds a version 2.1. No, now we're in 2.3. Come on. I don't know.
He's lost audio completely, I think, though, so he's going to reconnect.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like to me it's a lot of, so in addition to the judgment, it's the people who have a natural tendency towards some conservatism, like I know that I'm touching a thing. I personally, honestly want other people to double check me on this, rather than people whose tendency is to be more brash and be like, no, I've got it. I'm gonna fix these 12 things, because that's a kind of hero culture-y type thing that doesn't really seem like it has a place in this. So that's one of the characteristics people are looking for.
And it could have a place in this as long as
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
and it could have a place in this as long as we know, oh, hey, you committed this code, it broke things, and we found out 2 hours later you are still awake and you can fix it.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
I think there's a splitting of the baby here a little bit, and that I agree entirely with Monty that you don't take away good judgment with process, because that's usually what process accomplishes. We do need to create a set of sort of general social expectations about what you're going to be contributing to if you get contributor access.
Yeah. Even just writing down, like what Toshio just said, we kind of expect if you decide to, in your best judgment, go ahead and commit something and it breaks something, you'd best be, in fact, you should be happy if we call you on the phone and wake you up to fix it, because it's like
and you're putting your contributor access at risk. So
exactly.
Do it knowingly, use your judgment, and know that if you wreck a bunch of shit,
just know that we're all in this, and that we're going to expect you to clean up your mess if you make one.
Right.
And there's another level after that, and it's, does the feature make sense? Do we actually want to add this to Ansible or not?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different opinions, and that's something that I think has to have more consensus.
And that's the sort of thing that I'm sure we already have those discussions and build that kind of consensus internally, right?
Yeah.
And what's the mechanism that we do that?
I yell at these three guys.
How do you do that? How do you do that?
Well, us losing contributor
where
access
does that
means
happen?
getting fired.
So I'm taking us into another direction here deliberately. Where does that happen? Where do those discussions happen?
Either in our weekly meetings or in Slack
or in Slack.
Yes.
What is Slack?
Exactly. That what you want to say, that we should bring this out into Ansible Develop.
That's
and sometimes it has happened in Ansible Develop.
Right. Yeah.
Especially when it's somebody else bringing it up.
Right.
There will always, to some extent, be some control exerted by the company. I mean, that's just.
So there's a difference between control exerted by the company and visibility.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that Slack is super convenient. I think it's way better than IRC, as all of these net splits are ably demonstrating right at this very moment.
Yeah.
I'm going to open the kimono a little bit here. Even inside of the company, we've got a super secret cabal where the core team discusses things, don't we?
Yes and no.
Yeah. Okay. But yes.
Well,
right?
it's not open to everyone, Jimmy. There's very few people in that channel compared to Pound Engineering.
But
so it's not a secret that we exist, but what we discuss there is a secret. I mean, it's not a secret that we're purposely keeping from people, but they can't just watch a channel and say, hey, wait, you're talking about this module, and I really need to be able to tell customers this module is going to be changing in this way. They don't know it because where they can't see it.
But everything we discuss still eventually happens on the public stage. Just because we may have some early discussions in private eventually everything we do is still on the public stage.
Let me take it, and I think this is where Greg wants it to go. Do those discussions need to be private at all?
Some may. I'll go ahead and say that some may in very specific circumstances, but what do we default to?
Yeah. If there's a customer driven, like if there's like a secret customer related things, and that's, you can't really, having discussion about that in the open gets really tricky because you can't talk about the why as well. So, there's a good reason for some private discussions.
There's a thing that we talked about at Red Hat all the time before I left, and they may talk about it all the time again, but I don't know because I'm not paying attention. And that is default to open, right? What is our default state for communication about issues in the core team? We default to closed, right? That things may move to open at some point, but we default to closed.
I don't think so. I disagree with that. Just because we talk in our Slack channel, that's just because we do so much in Slack. It's not like I'm not saying it's intentional, right? No. So understand what I'm saying.
He's not saying we're secretive.
Saying that the intent is to be secretive. I'm saying that the effect is to be secretive.
The phrasing makes it sound like we're making all these
so it's not an attack.
Decisions.
It's not an attack.
And I just want to be clear that we don't.
I'm not accusing you of doing that. Okay. What I'm saying is that where you are comfortable is having these discussions where you have had them. And where you have had them in the past has been on a Slack channel that no one else knows about. And that's actually not true. People outside in the world are like, I went to Slack and tried to take Ansible because I wanted to start Ansible, but it looks like Ansible already has Slack stuff. So can we join it? Nope. Right?
There is a ripple effect of the convenience of Slack, which is a lack of transparency.
And there are multiple answers to this question, right? We can move everything to IRC. We've got a thriving IRC, too thriving probably, which is part of the problem. Because let's be honest, IRC is kind of old and noisy as shit. We've got 1,000 people on Ansible project. I don't know how many people we have on Ansible Devel. And Slack is just way better and nicer. We could conceivably open up Slack to people who aren't inside the fence line if we choose to do that. Right? There are a lot of things we could do. I'm just saying that I think that it's time to think about where the default conversations for Ansible developers happen. And we don't have to have an answer today, but this is a question that I'm going to keep asking. And now that we're inside of Red Hat, it's an even more important question because we're going to have more people asking.
So the only thing I'd add to that, which is more than just a convenience, is that the core team is very small. And if we have every one of these conversations, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but if we have every one of these conversations and there's a lot of churn on how to get it done in the community, we are reducing the throughput of the core
That's
team.
Fair.
At the same time, we're trying to not reduce it. And maybe that's the right thing to do, but it's something everybody in this room would need to be cognizant of as another potential effect of that.
That's fair.
If you read The Open Organization by the CEO of Red Hat, he kind of talks about, yes, having these kind of open discussions does make them take much longer, but the acceptance of those discussions is a lot more, it's a lot easier once the discussion's had, the acceptance is much easier rather than having
I mostly agree with that until I get pressure to get something delivered on time by a whole bunch of people at Red Hat.
There's another thing with surprises.
I'm with you. I'm just being sarcastic now. Yeah.
There's definitely a history in well-established history within Red Hat of taking those things and making them happen in the public.
Yes.
Very large projects with very tight deliverables have done that type of work. And it is partly a top-down, please do this out in the open, partly a bottom-up, we want to do this out in the open, and very much a social aspect of we're going to have those types of conversations in the open. You have a social expectation that the drive-by questioning that will derail the conversation is pushed away. It's either pushed away forcefully or pushed away gently, but either way it's pushed away so that when a conversation is happening, when a meeting is happening to discuss or decide something, it's very clear that that is what's to be discussed. If you have relevant input to that, raise your hand, share it. Don't just everybody talk at once. And if you can establish those types of things, then you can have those conversations out in the open. You can make the area that your developers default to speak in an environment that is safe for them to default speak in. It's a social fix, not a technical fix.
So we're at the hour, and I want to make sure that we have our time to break and not talk about these things. I guess our next.
The only thing I wanted to add is that this is what we were kind of attempting to do with the community meetings, and I think it will help doing those again.
Well, the community meeting is 1 hour a week, if that, and what you say on Slack is 24/7, right? So that's 1 hour as opposed to, I can't multiply 24 times 7 in my head because I'm an idiot, 168.
I'm fine to moving to IRC for now, to Ansible Develop for anything that we need to discuss internally. We just have to make a commitment that the team needs to look at that, because a lot of times we're not. Because as you say, IRC can get very noisy.
Yeah, or we open up Slack, which is something I want to talk about that inside the company fence line, but that's not for today.
You could also make an Ansible core channel that like is still open to people joining, but like you're really clear that like, I swear to God, we're going to kick ban you if you come in here and just ask us a question about like this is a place for like, we're trying to have open discussions about things, but like
Ansible grown-ups.
Yeah, basically, yeah, something like that. Like you can come in here. And this is where those discussions. If you want to have a discussion with the core team about an architectural decision, like so, this is a place where you can have a deep, meaningful conversation, not a whole bunch of how do I use the inventory?
No, I'm not going to help you install JBoss.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what Devel is for.
That's what Devel is for to me. I don't.
But
having
Devel,
too many channels, it gets it's too much noise.
Devel does have all the patch notifications and stuff like that in it already. So.
That's also easy to take out. I don't think they're very useful.
I could move those to a different channel.
So I really
that's really the only noise in there, right?
I really do want to wrap up so that and we can keep talking about this over the break, but I want to sort of wrap up with some. Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to commit to moving more conversations public somehow. I think we still have to talk about how we want to do that. We have to continue the conversation of what are the criteria, and they can be loose criteria, but there need to be criteria for bringing more people into sort of core commit. And I don't want to wait on this much longer, right? Because this is the place to kick off those conversations, and from here we'll sort of push more aggressively on these kinds of things. But at a high level, it's time to commit to doing these things. So, and then after the break, we'll move on to is it lunchtime? It's actual lunch.
At noon is lunch.
It's actual noon. All right, so lunch,
Yes,
and then
for lunch you'll be eating with the people from the Partner Summit.
So enjoy that.
That's
enjoy
exciting.
lunch.
Yeah.
And then we'll start back up at 1, and we'll be talking about Galaxy and issue triage, which I'm hoping will be a short conversation and brutal. And then how we manage the hundreds and thousands of new modules and extras. All right, so that's it. Thanks.
Everybody say hi to Brad.
And everyone wave and say hi to Crab and thank him for joining us. Thanks, Crab. All right. So where's lunch?
Brian.
I'm really excited.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really get to go Yeah,
mainly setting up the initial Jenkins server and doing some like the licenses. It might have to sign up before I came on this before. So we do a lot with core for July. I would say that.
That's okay for me.
For better or worse.
Hello.
Thanks for coming back, y'all.
I'm surprised you all came back. That was your chance to escape.
Wait, shit. Hurry, you can go back to your hotel room and be warm. I think they did turn on the heater in here a little bit so that we're not little popsicles.
Well, I put on a sweater.
We're also sitting next to the big cold window.
Shrews joined. Hi, Shrews. Woo.
Where's that?
It's on the
Oh.
thingy. Hi, y'all. So now on the. Did you leave? Let's talk about Galaxy now. That's what we have now. Galaxy.
Well, we have 3 topics in the next hour and 45 minutes.
We do. So we'll take them in order. Right, Galaxy. How's it going? So let me start by introducing the Galaxy team. That's him. That guy.
We have exactly
Yeah.
we have exactly one set of hands, yes.
That's a great improvement on where we were a year ago when there was no Galaxy team. There was Tower and Galaxy, and they were both Django. And every time we tried to get anyone to do one thing on Galaxy, a customer would need help on the other thing that was in Django. But now Galaxy is its own thing. What did we see? People want to talk about Galaxy. What do we want to talk about?
Should we give a quick update on the Galaxy?
Yeah, let's start there. How's Galaxy doing?
So at the moment, if anyone follows the Galaxy issues log, which is at Ansible Galaxy-issues on the GitHubs, I'm working through a backlog of bugs that has kind of come out of the 2.0 release. And maybe 1 or 2 minor small little features, but mostly bug fixes. And the plan is to release that as 2.0.1 a week from Friday. So that's what we're currently focused on, what the team of me is currently focused on. I don't know, do we want to get into roadmappy stuff or?
Yeah. Yes.
We haven't published an official, I don't think we published an official roadmap out to the community yet for the what we're calling the 2.1 release. The big thing that we've talked about for that is this sort of notion of a gold star. So how do we, in an automated way, look at a role and say it has all of the things that we consider to be, I don't know, good, and it rates a gold star, from us. So we're working on sort of we're going to work on defining what that means, and we're going to build a process that will be incorporated into the import process, as well as you'll be able to run this thing in the Ansible Galaxy client and know, in your development environment, does it rate a gold star? Do you have all the bits that we think, you should have for a proper or good role? I keep wanting to use the word proper since I'm in the UK. Is that a bad thing? So that's kind of one of the big things. The other thing we've been talking about is how do we better test roles? And so we've been thinking about maybe we could use containers. And so that's one of the things we're going to really start to explore in the next release of Galaxy is, we introduced Travis, right? And we're delivering a Travis CI file, and we've kind of given some instructions and whatnot on here's how you can, integrate Travis with your GitHub repo and get a Travis badge to show up inside Galaxy. And that's great, but the test case we're giving is, hey, just run the syntax check. And that's not really testing your role, obviously. It's not doing any assertions, and it's not actually executing the role. So we want to do those types of things, and we're going to explore if we can do that with containers. And eventually that leads us to maybe doing some things between Galaxy and OpenShift. So we may do some exploration there too. And so that kind of leads us into the Docker module discussion. I don't know if we want to get into that now, but that's sort of the thinking behind the next major release of Galaxy.
So before we get into that, I know there are folks here who use Galaxy a lot and may have some, feature ideas, things that they'd like to see, stuff rolled into maybe the client, the Ansible client itself. Maybe there's questions about versioning and dependencies and stuff like that. So sort of want to open up to any questions either here in the room or on IRC. I know we had some questions on the Etherpad, things we might want to talk about. So
I have a couple, if anybody else, so a couple of the use cases that I've been trying to figure out good ways to do is how to, and I know one of these is a long-term roadmap that there isn't a plan for right now, but right now I'd like to figure out a way to be able to programmatically add a role to Galaxy, and I think at least last time I checked, it wasn't really a thing that was something that you could do well. So that's a thing. Ultimately, it'd be really neat if my roles didn't have to point to GitHub repos, but I can live with that for now.
Why
because I don't use GitHub.
Yeah, but why do you can point Galaxy the command? You can point your roles file at roles hosted anywhere. Yeah. Like any Git repo, any Mercurial.
But somebody can't do so. I have official so I would like to. So that this sort of gets to the third thing, and these all sort of tie in a way. Is being able to mark things as something that came out of an organization. So I would love for there to be a role that's OpenStack / whatever that shows that it's not just like Monty's role for doing that, but it's actually something that came out of the official.
That was just pointing to your OpenStack repo, right?
Right. Yeah.
A roles requirements.
Yeah.
Sorry, a roles requirements file can point to any Git location.
Yes, but I would love it if the OpenStack ones, for people to use those, somebody didn't have to put a giant Git thing. I would love to be able to register with Galaxy that I have a role and that it is named, and it's a named role in Galaxy, and that's neat. But that the canonical Git source for it is not in GitHub.
So right now, one of the things we added to the Ansible CLI command is the ability to trigger those sources to add roles via that command. That was one of the 2.0 features. So that should be.
Yeah, but you still have to import. It still looks for it inside GitHub, right?
Yeah.
It still looks for it inside GitHub, but you just need to answer.
I can.
You can mess it a repo.
Great first start. We do in fact replicate our repos to GitHub, so that's that requirement of that's a wish list thing. I would like to be able to point these to non-GitHub locations, but I do replicate my repos to GitHub. So pointing them to GitHub things it's not broken right now. I have a workaround. I can do that, but ultimately, as a person who likes using open source, I have a very nice Git farm that you can clone from. I would love it if I could. If that never gets implemented, I will not die.
Sure.
Being able to create register on the command line is much more important. If that's there, that's really neat. I will go read it.
And the other way, if you just want a place to install them from, the requirements YAML format does have the ability to specify the source repository.
Yeah,
so you can have it. That was designed for people that wanted their stuff internally.
Yeah. It's more that I would love for people browsing Galaxy to be able to find official roles produced by the OpenStack project and have those work in the way that they expect them to. I think that's all really cool. I would like to push as much of the stuff that people in our community are doing into the official places in Ansible.
Right.
Yeah, we've got
the Galaxy Clio already allows you to use that, but it doesn't show on the Galaxy side.
Yeah, it's not good for sharing.
Well, and we've got this weird sort of thing where we've got the Galaxy client and then the Galaxy server, and the Galaxy server has a bunch of things, And the Galaxy client has things that don't actually necessarily relate to the Galaxy server, right? Like the ability to define roles that aren't in the upstream Galaxy server. So there's a little bit of, separation there. That.
Oh, and also, if I'm not incorrect about this, and I might be, so tell me I'm wrong. I think if I owe off or whatever to GitHub as me, and then register a thing that's in an org that I have access to Galaxy, it looks like a role that I registered as, like it shows up as an eMonty role, not as the, because it's already sorted in GitHub into the organization.
We fixed that. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. So
this is the funnest session ever. Already fixed all of my concerns.
So to get that to work on your current roles, you'll actually have to delete them and re-import them, and then they'll show up under your organization.
Neat.
And you can also go to galaxy.ansible.com/ your organization or your name, your GitHub name, and see all your roles too. So you sort of have a Galaxy page now, if you will, for yourself or for your organization.
Cool. I'm going to go vote that as we speak.
Anyone want anything else in particular out of Galaxy?
Yeah.
I have a thing that it probably just has been a bug that I filed and I haven't yet, but mostly what we struggle with as an organization, we have up to 3, I think, or maybe even 4 distinct piles of playbooks in 4 different repositories that are targeting different things, but we all try and do some very unique, common things as part of that. And we're struggling with ways of sharing the roles around each other. And we want to make use of role repositories and Galaxy role requirement type files. But where we're stumbling is the Galaxy CLI tool is fairly reasonable for installing all those things exactly once. And if you want to update them or refresh them,
I have merge requests in for that.
With what?
I have merge requests in for that.
Do you? So
several times. Probably.
Is this? Are you asking for versioning?
It's not so much versioning. It's just rerun it to make sure that I have the version that I've requested.
I have a merge request in that actually makes install idempotent. So you run it once, it does it. You run it again, it does nothing if the roles haven't changed. If the roles file has changed, it only changes the ones it does.
Right. So that was the thing. It was ironic that the Ansible tool was not idempotent.
I thought at one point, the way I originally wrote it, it was, if it was installed, it didn't do anything. You had to do -- force to make it install a newer version.
That has some other weird.
That had some problems, especially when it dealt with deps. And those bugs got fixed along the way, but the rewrite 2.0 kind of definitely rebroke some things. So if that's an issue again. But yeah, sorry.
And that's a PR against the Ansible client, right? That you have open.
Yeah. There's a couple of other things that go in there, and it's using versions and multiple versions at the same time. There's a lot of people that have a role and then use it across several projects inside their company. And
I'll give a warning for that in my version. Yeah, I have a warning for that in the same PR that basically says, hey, you're trying to install 2 different versions of the same role at the same time.
Yeah, so we have to kind of figure out what I was talking with Serge about earlier was figuring out a way to somehow make a different directory structure work to make versioning work so that multiple roles with the same name.
You really don't want multiple versions of the same role run by the same playbook, because then you get weird behavior that you don't expect. It's actually much better to say, hey, this is broken. Don't install different versions of the same role for the use by the same playbook.
The original idea was that, yes, a role path would be you could have multiple role paths, and with the Galaxy command, you can install roles into different role paths, and then you point your playbooks at a given role path.
Yeah, but if the same playbook is depending through role dependencies on 2 different versions, and say a variable gets defined completely differently in the 2 versions, which one is actually the right
foo v1 and foo v1.1, you wouldn't want both of those to be in the same playbook potentially.
But that is what you're saying. If you allow different versions
People are actually doing that right now by symlinking the roles.
It's very much so. Yeah.
The way I understood it, it wasn't necessarily about having them in the same playbook, but having multiple versions available to playbooks, and then specifying which version you want in a given playbook.
Yeah. So in the playbook, you say role version.
I don't want to define. Well, I mean, what I want is not that important. But really,
there's several cases. There's several use cases. These are all complementary, not exclusive.
I tried avoiding making Galaxy a package manager.
Yes.
It's kind of unavoidable.
I surrendered to Greg last week saying, yes, I hate it, but Ansible Galaxy has to be a package manager.
But the other thing I would quite like is if you didn't have to run Ansible Galaxy install, you could just say, hey, this playbook relies on this roles file and uses this roles directory, and when you run Ansible playbook, it automatically updates those.
I have that wish list item.
Basically, at the moment, I have to write documentation that says, make sure your roles are up to date before running this playbook. And then you kind of go, why the hell am I having to do this? I already have some automation. Why isn't it working for me?
Something like virtual env for roles.
I actually want to get rid of the requirements file. If we can get that, you run Ansible Galaxy against the play and it'll pull down the requirements, or you run the play and it'll pull down the requirements from whitelisted sites, not just from any site, because then you could be running God knows what.
Yeah, that was another thing we had potentially talked about, was merging the requirements.yaml syntax, what Brian was talking about, into the role, into the playbook itself. So you say, I want role foo, and foo isn't installed, and it will go and download foo v whatever for that first time for that playbook when you need it, kind of on demand. So
there's a few things that we need to hash out, and to get there, we need to deal with the versioning, deal with the role pathing, and dealing with having multiple roles in different multiple versions of the same role for different playbooks, and even having multiple versions of the same role on the same playbook, which I think is the trickiest one.
And I think we, like Will said, just don't allow that.
And I'm fine with that, but that we don't detect that now, and it should be either an error or warning or actually work. It doesn't, none of those right now.
Well, right now people would have to name it differently, even if it was the same role, and then it's just like really two different roles.
And they do it by either changing the directory name and putting the version in, and then calling the role with version, which I think it might even be the way to work in the end with versions. But then we have to tell people, well, you can't have multiple versions of the same role in the same play. And we don't detect that right now. Right now it works by accident and if people force it, and not exactly how people want it to work. So it doesn't work.
If you do the auto detection and installation of things, I would like to request that there is still a way to be able to pre-install like roles by
you just run Ansible Galaxy against the playbook.
Galaxy against the playbook rather than playbook against the playbook.
Then against the requirements file.
Right.
I want to do away with the requirements. We had 7 different ways of specifying roles. That was crazy. I think in 2.0 we're down to 5. I think.
It's an improvement.
It gets tricky. I want to bring it down to the roles are defined in the playbook and do everything from there. There's really no reason to create a requirements file.
Can we do it with an include mechanism so that we can say that the playbook can just include the roles file and that will do it for them?
I've proposed having role includes like we have bars includes and task includes and play includes, even though the play and task includes are called include. There's a lot of things there. I think the best thing to do is first get the versioning and downloading nailed down. Then we add a one way to specify a role. What do you need? Role name is okay, then you'll always get the latest. If you specify a version, it'll be this way, and the role will be named that way. If the role is being installed from version and there's no base role, symlink to the base role name. So now when you use the base role, it's there. Add the option of update base role if it's not latest version. I mean, there's many things we can add there.
Should we talk about versioning more explicitly at this point? Is it the sort of conversation we want to have here, or is it a deep dive conversation for later?
Both, I would say. It's not an easy conversation. Versioning is always ask anybody that's ever done a package manager. That's especially when you want multiple versions to live together. Actually, they do. Some better than others.
The key is the word really there. Really supports.
Some better than others. But there's many package managers that live with multiple versions of libraries or utilities.
Yeah, actually, several of the JavaScript tool chains do that way better than the rest of them because they're totally happy with copying shit. So, like that's just like, yeah, we're going to copy into the web root, done. And all the rest of us find that really distasteful, and so our tools don't actually deal well with this, other than the Microsoft .NET stuff.
Yeah.
The multi-versions of things as well.
And others get around it with alternatives, which lets you have everything installed but only use one. Yeah. In this case, we need something a bit more flexible that you can call by version or get the latest. Or I'll publish something to Ansible Develop what my thoughts are. I published parts of it all over the place. I think we need to just get a working group on it and discuss it, nail it down, and start with the versions, which I think everything else depends on. Then we can start removing requirements files, doing the auto download, all that. The way I rewrote Galaxy API is that you can actually use the API classes without going through the Ansible Galaxy tool. And I did that specifically because I wanted to be able to download automatically when you're running Ansible playbooks the roles you need for the play. I mean, we have a lot of the steps there, but there's I think we need to decide how versions work and how the download needs to work first before we can add those features. But once we have that, I think they'll fall like dominoes.
That is Brian's action now. So,
I should shut up.
Well, it's I'd say this is the Galaxy client side first, and then the Galaxy server side will sort of inherit whatever we decide that the client's supposed to do.
Yeah, this is more client side because it has to deal with installing and managing the roles that are downloaded. It doesn't really have anything to do with the Galaxy service itself.
What else do we want to cover about Galaxy?
Robin has a good point about what it's for, what it's not for.
Just like
whatever it is that they want to do with it, no matter how dirty or undirty we think that is. But I think if we're going to talk about, what directions we want to take, is it a giant repository? Is it a place where people go because it's a nice, easy way to get something and learn about it and just install it? Or are there bigger, bolder goals beyond that? Because what I'm hearing and hear right now is people are using Galaxy for all sorts of things, whereas I just sort of saw it as this is sort of a cool place to make it easy for someone to download something awful like the Elk Stack and make it run.
And we've had discussions about, do we want Galaxy to be the proving ground for modules and other plugins that not necessarily make extras the landing spot for everything, but make Galaxy that initial landing spot for things potentially?
Well, as of right now, Galaxy is the de facto Ansible role package manager is essentially what it is, without some of the features that would make it a good package manager. And in practice, people use it for sharing things and for their own purposes. People put their own roles into Galaxy that they then themselves use in production, and they just share it on Galaxy because it's a convenient place to do it. People use it to upload 25 different examples of the exact same install of a web server.
Unix.
We use Galaxy for all of our versioning of roles. We don't actually use Ansible, galaxy.ansible.com at all, but we use it for ensuring that we have the correct versions of roles available to a playbook, so that if we're testing a new version of a role, we can make sure that role is only installed in prod. So it's only installed in a testing environment. If you rerun against prod, it will install the old roles. So it does that too.
But again, that's the client, right? So, and again, this is probably where we should be crisp. What is the purpose of Galaxy Client and what is the purpose of Galaxy Server? And Galaxy Client has a super set of features, and Galaxy Server has a limited set of features and a different mandate. Yes.
When are we open sourcing Galaxy Server?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Oh, so now you're that guy. Well, I'll tell you this. It's going to be a lot easier to open source Galaxy Server than it is to open source Tower, right? So because we don't have any business issues to sort out with Galaxy because no one's making any money off of it.
I did all the legwork on it a year and a half ago.
Yeah, we talked about doing this back in the day, but we figured, well, maybe there's a way to turn this into some kind of business thing. So we made the choice, well, we won't open source it right yet. And now all those ships have sailed. So I think the answer is when it seems like it's convenient enough and we feel like people would do things to help.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the neat things in with like Docker Hub is that you can Docker run Docker Hub, and that's the way that you get a Docker Hub locally. And so so rather than having, maybe you can point it at other things or you can whatever, your thing is just what Docker Hub are you going to use for your Dockers, and it seems like the same, although it's not exactly the same thing, but a similar thing could be useful to people in this. It was really easy for them to run a local.
I think that the mechanics of open source, I mean, I'd have to talk to Todd and various folks to make sure that there's no business case that I'm missing. But really, the only downside is that we just don't have that many resources upstream on Galaxy. So if we open up the Galaxy source code and we get a bunch of people, then Chris's time ends up being sort of changed to, now I have to onboard all these PRs and that's okay. That's a good problem to have. It's just that's the only consideration really. So, and the thing is that people are then going to take Galaxy and they're going to make their own Galaxy servers and they're going to make ridiculous demands on, hey, I need this for my private Galaxy server, so please accept this PR that has absolutely no connection to what you want to do with the public stuff, and then that's fine. It's just overhead, and we know that overhead is coming.
I think.
But that said, there's no reason to not do it, really.
I think the first question we got in San Francisco in 2013, when we first kind of debuted the Galaxy idea, was when can I run my own Galaxy server internally? So,
yeah,
like I said, if I had put that option in there as a potential use case for that from the beginning.
Yep. Turns out there's lots of people who do these workflows, but completely inside of their enterprise organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they can use their own Git right now to host and manage the roles.
Right.
They just don't get some of the things Galaxy gives you, the search, the ratings, pretty web GUI.
And those are the things that, to be clear, sucked anyway for the longest time. But now they don't suck. Now they're actually pretty good. And getting closer to GitHub was what allowed us to make that stuff good, because we could leverage what GitHub was good at, and we could make Galaxy more of a searchable, filterable, where the metadata to describe the roles lives. People who walk away from GitHub as the backend are then going to lose that until they re-implement those features for whatever backend they're talking to.
The question that Vincent asked there, I believe, was the second question in San Francisco. Can we have Galaxy point at private repos? And the answer was no, because we wanted everything to be open.
But if we have an open source Galaxy, there's absolutely no reason you couldn't point it to a private repo. That's just a flag you turn on or off, I imagine.
Like I said, I did all the legwork to open source it, and around that same time was when the requirements YAML format was brought in.
Well, that was the important driver for 1.8 was actually, it wasn't the YAML format, it was just being able to specify anything that wasn't Ansible Galaxy sources.
But that's what allowed it. And
it wasn't, no. I just changed it so that you could just do git plus URL, and that was sufficient to work out that it was.
Yeah.
That didn't need the YAML file at all. The YAML was kind of bolted on afterwards.
Right, but yeah, you could have, if you kept it in the text format, you could have kept it that way.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
You only
Well,
deprecated
it works in all formats now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, again, we had the problem of we had 7 different ways to tell what a role is, and it should be flexible, but it should also not be crazy like it is now.
Right. My point was just that met that need of 99% of the users that didn't want to put things on GitHub and wanted to keep things private. They could still continue to do that.
Also, one thing that broke in 1.9, Ansible Galaxy Cleat isn't able to use SVN or Mercurial as repos. I've had one person complain about that. Anybody else care?
I don't think the version was ever supported, but Mercurial was to start with. And in fact, I'm pretty sure the last time I tested it tested with Mercurial against Bitbucket, and it was fine. I'm pretty sure that's fixed again.
Did I?
Yeah, but I mean,
I thought I did it.
I mean, Python itself is starting the slow, inexorable move to get from Mercurial. So I think the last vestiges of people caring about that are going away.
I was thinking of bringing that back, and that complicates things a bit. But if we stick with Git and try to make a best effort for Mercurial, it was designed initially to be able to use any version control system for which Ansible had a module.
No, that's not right. It was.
It was in the design. It was never applied.
Okay. Yeah.
Because then you hard coded the list to Git, and then
that's because,
to get it Mercurial. But
yeah, I think I just implemented the bits that would work with Mercurial and Git, and didn't bother and left implementing Subversion. That's why it's a hard-coded list. It's because those were the ones that actually be done, and anything else wasn't supported.
Yeah, no.
But it was nothing to do with an Ansible module, because it just uses the command line tools to do it.
No, it calls the Ansible Git module.
Are you thinking about the Ansible call?
I think it just calls a Git.
I might be
generates
confused
a
right
Git
now.
command
Don't listen to me.
and then runs it.
I might be thinking Ansible Pool. Yes,
I
been
thought we
working
had
on
kind of
Pool so much
designed
that they merge in my
along
head.
the lines of Ansible Pool, which does use the module for things. But yeah.
Or I was thinking of changing Galaxy to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think maybe we had discussed it so that it wasn't hard-coded anymore, that it was more ingrained.
Yeah, sure. Buffer overflow.
All right, so I think we've got sort of pretty general ideas of what we're doing with Galaxy, what we think we want to do with Galaxy. It seems like there's broad agreement on the directions we want to go. It's just a matter of having the cycles to do it, both on the client side and on the server side. Looks like on the client side, we need to think about versioning and multiple versions and the package manager-y kinds of features, and Brian's on the hook for that. We're going to talk about open sourcing it. Robin's on the hook for that. We're going to talk about actually continuing to make the server better, and as always, Mr. Hausneck is on the hook for all of that.
Actually, a question that goes also into making a package manager. The question I was asked before, are we expanding to more than roles?
Are we expanding it to more than roles? I don't think so right now. We have had, so to be specific, we would use, people can already do it now, and they do.
By
right?
embedding it in roles, yeah, but
that's the
but then you've got to use a fake role to get the library.
Yes.
Or the plugin or the callback.
Because you can embed basically anything in a role, people are already going to use the role as a wrapper to push certain packages / plugins / whatever. And the question is, I guess, do we want to make that a default sort of behavior that we push for new modules, new...
No, not even that. I was asking if we want to bypass that and make them first-class citizens and make them objects aside from the role. Because if they're still in the role, it doesn't matter because the versioning won't care. We're dealing with roles, even if the role is just to share a callback. But do we want to add callback plugins as an object that people can share and use directly versus indirectly through a role?
My personal feeling is we have enough to chew on as it is.
Yeah, I would say stick with the things that you can deliver through a role, allow them to continue to be delivered through the role until somebody comes up with a really, really good use case.
That makes my life a lot easier.
I can't accomplish it with roles, but if I had another way, I really want to do this. Don't make it until somebody comes and asks for it.
Hey, Serge.
I'm happy. I just wanted to clear that.
Wave hello so Crab can see you, Serge. That's Serge in the back. There he is. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Yes, you can.
Yeah, the other long-term thing we need to do for the Galaxy command line is to kind of clean up the code and reorganize it into more of a reusable library, like Vault was written from the beginning to do. That will allow us to do some of the neater things internally to Playbook.
I already did a lot of that in 2.0.
Yeah, you did a lot of it. There's still even more, though, that needs to be done.
We still need to fix how roles themselves are and Galaxy roles, which wrap the internal roles. But, I mean, I still don't know how to tackle that.
How?
Especially not without breaking backwards compatibility.
So Vincent asks, when I look at the Galaxy docs, you can actually do something with versioned roles.
That was the original text requirement file, and you could, and with the YAML, the same thing, you can actually install a specific version.
And from the command line as a tarball.
Yep. Where version was any SHA branch or otherwise addressable thing in Git.
Sorry, it's not any addressable thing in Git yet. There's a commit, there's a merge request in to get all tree issues allowed as versions, but it's still not. In fact, yeah. Can we just get that one approved like today, because it's been rebased about 100 times and it's spot on.
Send me the.
I know which one it is. It's on my short list.
Which tree-ish didn't work? Because it used to work with
so
tags,
commit IDs and
SHAs.
tags work. Those are the only things. So branches don't work. You can't just track the head of a branch.
I thought it did, because by default it did master.
But
No, this head is a ref.
Oh, okay. I thought it did master by default. Okay.
All right. Well,
I have to delete my previously imported role from Galaxy to get the org thing.
Yeah.
I cannot find anywhere in Galaxy the ability to delete a role.
Should be on my roles.
Nope.
Should be listed there.
Yeah. If I uncheck it so that it's not checked, it doesn't delete anything.
It should.
Right. It should. It doesn't. I just reported the finding.
All right.
It's I can file an actual issue. Sure. It'd be useful. Cool.
okay, so let's wrap that up. We've got some things we're going to be doing there. The next thing on the agenda is issue triage. So next, issue triage. My take on this is actually pretty straightforward, and that is we should have a fairly high bar for what we require out of an issue. And if it doesn't, not because I want people to go away, but out of self-defense. There are so many issues that are coming in that I think we need to have some very clear guidelines for it. This stuff must be in an issue. And if we don't have those things, we will put that issue in some state that says this issue will be ignored until it has all these things. Or we may simply auto-close and say, go back and do it again using this form. And I suspect that we'll be very strict about that. But then once we have that, that will allow us to do things like put workflow around issues that we can't do now. For instance, one of the